Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you with us today. If you are a new listener, thank you for coming with us for the conversation. Glad you found us. Now, our new listeners, we ask a couple things just so you can get integrated with the show. Number one, don't forget to subscribe. We're out there everywhere. I don't know of a platform where that we're not on, so take a look there and subscribe wherever you are. Two, we want you to go to the rexandrewsshow.com website. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, we got some really cool things out there, sponsors. We're part of the Daydreamers podcast network. But the big thing is go look at the profiles of our guests. And we have everybody's profile out there. The reason is we do talk about their lives and their biographies. Our show's a microbiography, but we can't touch everything. So you can get a profile information out there. You can also get links to their social media, what they're up to. And so, it's interesting people doing interesting things, overcoming obstacles, doing great things. So stop by. Now, the last thing that I ask is that, I'm not bashful. I will beg. So if you like what we're doing, hit us up with 5 stars. Now, I'm a well-dressed beggar today because I have a shirt with a collar on. So a well-dressed beggar is a professional, but I'm still a beggar. So hit us up with those 5 stars. Okay, fantastic. Now, I like to always recognize our listeners that are listening in around the world. We have been very blessed. We're in 32 countries with listeners, over 520 cities across 6 continents. And if we could figure out a way to market to penguins, but probably more important, help them recharge their cell phones, we would have listeners in Antarctica. But I have a couple people heading to Antarctica, so we'll see. Okay. Wanted to recognize the listeners today. So welcome to those who are tuning in from West Sacramento, California. So welcome to the folks in West Sacramento. All right. Interesting guest today. First that I've ever done of this type of interview. You'll find it very unique. So let's get this introduction done. Number one, she's a peer for me. She's a podcaster. I always love to have other podcasters on, so that's great. She's a writing coach, and also in addition to that, some specific niche there. In addition to writing coach, she's a recovery writing coach. So she basically helps people in that space. And there's a lot of people that are doing recovery. She's an author, okay? And she's got a couple courses coming up to teach some of the things that we'll talk about today. Of course, now the most important title she has is she's a mother. And, for women and men, being a parent, there's nothing more important to that in the grand scheme of things. And of course, right next to that is being a spouse. And so she's a wife and she's got a great family. And then another aspect about her is she's an addiction survivor, but it's not what you think. Okay. There are all kinds of addictions, but it's not what you think. So I'd like to welcome to the show this morning, Robin Clare. Robin, how are you?
Great, Rex. How are you today?
Fantastic. We're dialing in. Now, you're on a familiar area for me. I used to live in Connecticut, so welcome to the folks in Connecticut. Hopefully we can find a few listeners in those little towns out there. It's so beautiful. Now, I'm outside of Boulder here, so we have a kind of a different type of beauty here, but I love that area. So spent a couple of years up there. All right. So microbiography show, we talk about people's influences, pivot points, things that altered their lives. And you have some very interesting things that we're going to talk about. Addiction, different than drugs and alcohol, first of its kind. So let's get into it. Okay. We want to understand the background and how you got there. So we're going to go through your whole timeline and talk about some things that influence us. Because, even when you get to our age, I'm going to guess about what your is and mine there too. We've been influenced by different experiences and different people. So we'll start out, Robin, where were you born?
Yeah, so I was born in Neptune, New Jersey.
Neptune, New Jersey.
Yeah.
We got to have some listeners in Neptune, so hopefully we'll find some, okay? Now,
Yeah.
Did you grow up in Neptune or did you move around?
Well, I grew up in Freehold, New Jersey, around the corner from Bruce Springsteen. He was actually my brother and he were friends.
Oh, wow.
And it's just a cute story. My brother used to say, all he ever wants to do is play his guitar. He never wants to come out. See, it paid off, right?
Oh, I just have funny memories of Bruce Springsteen's. When his album, The River, came out, I used to go because I played a little football in college and I was always lifting weights. And I went to a gym. And the guy that ran the gym, had that on constantly. Now, for those who's ever listened to that album, there's a lot of the music on that that's kind of dreary. I mean, it's not all
Yes.
positive. So I'd go there and I want to be all pumped up, and then he's playing those sad songs. I'm like, dude, will you please change and give us some different music? All right. So you grew. Where did you grow up then? Were you stable or did you move around?
No, we actually stayed in the same house.
Okay.
And then I left when I was 17 to come up to Connecticut to go to college,
Okay.
to the University of Hartford, and then I just stayed. Um, and because I loved Connecticut,
Yeah.
it's so beautiful, and there's no commuter traffic.
Yes. That's exactly
And
right.
in New Jersey, it's awful.
Yes. Yeah.
So I decided I didn't want to commute into the city. Um, so I did commute into Hartford, and that was a 10-minute drive
Yeah,
from West
exactly.
Hartford.
Exactly. It's not very far. When we lived in Connecticut, it was kind of fun because we had friends that actually taught at Yale and things, and so it's a
Mhm.
it's a wonderful area. Okay, so growing up, what were your interests? Did you sports, drama, theater, dance, shoplifting? Actually, I had a guy on the show, a guest, who by the age of 15 was a car thief. So, what types of things did you do when you weren't in school?
Yeah, so I would say I didn't really have anything too specific. I was pretty athletic. I played varsity sports in high school, and I went to camp every summer, and I I was very active in I guess school government. Is
Okay,
that what we
yeah.
call it? I was in middle school, I was the president of the school council, and then in high school I was president of my freshman class and my senior class.
Oh,
So
wow.
I don't know though. I mean, I don't think I know by my senior year I was actually doing that to see if I could help get into college.
I like that. I started in student leadership and student council in fourth grade. Was the president of my class pretty much all through, and spoke at my graduation. I mean, it was some
Yeah.
fun. And I remember because I had worked my tail off through my junior year, so my senior year was skating. I had 4 gym classes, typing, and student council. So people
Wow.
used to laugh at me. It's like, "What are you doing here?" And it's like, "Well, it's the fun side." So that's great. So you had leadership and sports. Sports is such a
Mhm.
great thing. Teaches people discipline and all those great things. Okay, let's talk about your family a little bit. So the influences
Yeah.
of that. Now, in interviewing hundreds of people through my radio and podcasting career, I've kind of found that there are 3 buckets that I kind of put people in from parenting. So the first one is the super launching parents. So they're the ones that are fully engaged and pushing their kids and helping them get to places and enabling them. And then there's sort of the middle bucket, which is the non-participatory. And the reason of that, I call that, is parents that certainly love their kids, but they were so busy eking out a living or so deep in a career that they weren't always there. They weren't always fully engaged, and that influences kids. Okay. And then
Yeah.
the last one I call the struggle bucket. Okay. And that's environments where there is, abuse, addiction, extreme poverty, just, dysfunction. And that often motivates kids to overcome and basically say, hey, I'm going to build a life that's not like this. Okay. So we'll talk about that a little bit. What did your parents do as you're growing up? What types of careers and work and those types of things?
Yeah, so my father was a dentist and
Okay.
very highly regarded. My both of my parents grew up in New York City and then moved down to Freehold, which was like a chicken farm place
Oh,
at
wow.
that point. It was not very sophisticated, and they're coming out of the city, and so my dad had a very successful practice, very well liked. When he
Okay.
passed away, they needed like cops to keep the traffic
Yeah.
intact for all the people that came out to honor him. And my mom too was growing up. She was a traditional mom, but she helped do the fundraising to build the hospital
Hmm.
in our town. And then when I was in middle school, she became a real estate broker and became very successful at it. And the best part for me was I took over the kitchen at that point.
Okay.
And and I learned to become a very good cook because I was making dinner for the
Yeah.
family
For the family.
starting in middle school.
Okay.
And
Wow.
and I do love to cook. I love to cook now. I'd rather
Okay.
cook dinner than go out to dinner.
Yeah.
Um, because I just find I have very rarely, unless it's an ethnic food, go to a restaurant where I think that the food is better than what I'm serving at home, organic and healthy and cooked easy. Like my husband and I always laugh. We like easy food,
Yeah. That's
you
great.
know.
So let me ask you this next question. Were you a good student in school?
I could have been, I'm, but I also was part of a group of kids that, um, you know how there's like segments of kids. I think I
Sure.
was more part of the partying crowd.
Okay. Very
So we
social
partied
then.
a lot. Very social. We partied all the time. We did things that we shouldn't have been driving our cars. You know, I
Wow.
don't even know how we made it through high school.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and it's interesting though when we had our last reunion and someone said, "What do you do?" And to simplify what I do, I said, "I'm a life coach." And the entire table of my friends started laughing. And I go, "Why are you laughing at that?" They said, "You were always like that. Like we'd be partying on the side of a mountain and you'd say, Robin, hey, maybe you shouldn't stand so close to the edge." You know,
Yeah, that's
like
funny.
everybody come back. Like I was always rallying the troops to be safe. Yeah,
That's
it was
great.
fun.
When I was a kid, I grew up in the shadow of the Coors Brewery in Golden, Colorado. And
Hmm.
there they have a tour, and then they have the lounge where you can go drink beer. Now, the drinking age was 18, so a lot of us were old enough to go drink then. So we'd go take the short tour. We wouldn't tour the brewery. We'd just go straight to the lounge and have beer. So very frequently, we were at lunchtime drinking beer at Coors
Hmm.
free. And so, yeah, I understand the being a little bit like you said. Uh, I don't know how I made it, but I did, and it was funny because I think a lot of people that didn't think I was a goofball rebel type and party guy, because I was the class president and I got
Yes.
away with so much. So yeah, I get that. And so anyway, all right. Now I want to have you set aside your parents for a second. Okay.
Hmm.
Was there anybody in your formative years that made a huge influence on you? A lot of times in teenagers, we don't want to listen to our parents. Okay. Is there someone who really made a big impact on you?
Yes, we had teachers in high school that were very cool. You know, they probably were 22, 23, like,
Yeah.
but they were teachers, so they had like this uh yeah, Mr. Moses was one I can think of. He probably wasn't much older than us.
Yeah.
And so I would go to them with situations to talk with them. I was actually pretty close with both of my grandmothers as well.
Okay. Okay.
And yeah, I think that because I spent the summers with my grandmothers, and so that that gave me another a deep level of family.
Okay.
We
So,
have a home in Pennsylvania that my great grandparents built,
wow.
and so we're on the sixth generation of family, and so we were very fortunate that we spent all of our summers there as kids with
Well, that's
them.
okay. So, yeah, grandparent influence is huge. They have that sageness. I am a grandpa,
Mhm.
only one so far. I've got 5 kids, and when you're a grandparent, you have a little different perspective because you're old enough to
Mhm.
appreciate things. You know what's
Yes.
important and when it's not, but you can still send the kids home, and so it's a lot of fun. I get that. So let's talk about your college years. Did you
Mhm.
continue the partying? What did you major in? What was your college experience?
Yeah, so my freshman year, my parents had no idea how much money to send me to college with, and they sent me with way too much money, way too big of an allowance, and I was just continuing the partying. And then in the middle of, and I had like a 2.3 average. I mean, not very good. And then my father had his first of three open heart surgeries. And at the time, he was one of the first people to get a triple bypass on
Oh,
the
wow.
in the Northeast, and that was major surgery then. And the money stopped.
Oh, yeah.
My
Yeah.
mom said whatever she was sending me a month, she said she'd send that amount for the entire second semester. And
Yeah.
so I then met a young man who was very studious and started dating him. And by the time I graduated, I had a 3.5 average.
Yeah.
So I really turned that around. I became very, very serious about my studies, and knew that I had to graduate with good grades, or I wouldn't get a job.
Yeah.
So that's how that went.
And back in those days, the early days of heart surgery, oh my goodness, they cut through the
They
rib
broke the
cage,
chest
broke the
open, the
chest
ribs.
open, and my uncle had it, and he literally, the scar was like a zipper all the way down past his navel. I mean, they really opened
Yeah,
you up, and so that
yeah,
was major evasive surgery compared today, where they do the microsurgeries on that. Oh,
I know, it's
completely.
crazy.
Yeah. So, what did you get your degree in?
So I have an undergraduate degree in accounting, business and accounting,
Okay.
and then I went back after I graduated and got my master's degree in business as well, an MBA in business. And I always tell the story that when I started my MBA, I was married to someone else. And then when I graduated, I was married to my current husband, and my daughter was 3.
Okay.
So going for my MBA became like the consistent part of my life,
Right.
like one class a semester, every semester. And it took me 8 years, but I persevered, and it was interesting. At the end, I wasn't going to do graduation because it took so long, and my husband talked me into it, and my father came, and he said it was like he died he was dying a few months later, and he said to me that was one of the most proudest moments of his life.
Wow.
So sometimes we forget that, right? That these milestones that we achieve as children of parents
Yeah.
are not just for us.
No, they're not.
Right.
So let's talk one last thing about family and upbringing. Do you have siblings? And if so, did any of them
I
survive your harassment?
Well, I'm the youngest
Okay.
of 2 brothers, so you
Oh my
might want to
goodness.
ask me that question.
Yes. Did you
Um,
survive? Yeah.
I did survive. I did survive. I have memories of sitting in the car and being in the middle with the 2 of them fighting, and the only places that the punches were landing was on me. You know? And then I also discovered that as a girl, I had a secret weapon. I could say they were hitting me, and maybe they weren't.
Yeah.
Like, just to get to watch what I want to on TV. So
Yeah.
I had my revenge points too.
Well, it's interesting, and the reason I ask about siblings is sometimes abuse and those types of things come from siblings. Now
Mhm.
of course there's a normal horseplay of kids. There
Yes,
when
that
my
wasn't abuse.
with my brothers, we would wrestle and roughhouse so much my mom would just throw us out of the house, and we would continue the roughhousing, but we just throw us out of the house. So I don't look back and say any of that was abuse. That was just kids, but sometimes there is, and that's why I ask. Okay, let's pop through after college. Now I want to talk about this. You had an addiction. Okay.
I did.
Okay.
Yep,
If you could share your addiction, and then when did
sure.
this start?
Yeah, so this really started when I was 7 years old, when my mom put me on my first diet.
Wow.
And my parents were interested in perfection in their own way. My dad was a professional man. He would even say, you're the children of professional people, and you should act that way. So
Yeah.
my brothers and I talk about that often, what impact that had on us. And then my mom had this perception of how you looked and how you dressed was how people judged you. And so I
Mm-hmm.
had this idea of perfection coming at me from from both of my parents in
From
their own way,
early age,
so
selling. Wow.
early. And so, being the partying type I was in high school, I discovered when it was around when I was 17, after being on many diets,
Okay.
that if I had the munchies and I pigged out, that I could actually not gain weight by being bulimic.
Ah,
And so I started with bulimia in at 17, and this lasted for 40 years.
whoa.
I struggled with I called it obsessive compulsive food disorder,
Okay.
and then bulimia,
Bulimia.
and followed by bulimia, and then finally, after 40 years, I was able to come into recovery. But even throughout my entire journey, my adult journey, it just followed me. And I would be like, why can't I stop this? Why can't I get a handle on this? And then once I went into therapy, I began to see that I had a pattern of humiliation in my life, that there were at least 20 times where I was publicly humiliated. Now, not being sent into the center square and tarred and feathered, but humiliation is a very big problem. It's maybe another name for bullying,
Mm-hmm.
and we know how big bullying is. But throughout our lives, I believe that we are put into humiliating situations, and if we don't heal from the humiliation, then we move into suffering. And if we don't heal our suffering, then we look for addictive sources to make us feel better. So in my writing of my books, what I discovered is that what we're really addicted to, Rex, is suffering.
Okay.
And that and until we heal the trauma patterns from our childhood, teen years, adult years, we can't really come into true recovery, because when we do the traditional recovery route, what we're really only healing is the symptoms of the problem.
Okay.
The true problem is the suffering. And so I had to go through a lot of healing in my own life to be able to see what I was suffering over, and to go and just love that part of myself again.
So let me ask you a question. You talked about the fact that your parents wanted perfection and they were
Mhm.
driving this. And this is a difficult question, but okay, I'm going to have to throw it out there. Were you chubby or plump? Did you have a body type? Or was it just you had a normal body and they were just pressing on you? So what was that like?
Yeah, so I think when my mom put me on the diet, I maybe had a little belly, and what I've come to understand about that is that I was very athletic,
Uh-huh.
and I still have that same belly.
Yeah.
It's still there no matter what I weigh.
Yeah.
And it's just my body type. And my I think my grandmother said to my mom, Robin's getting chubby. You need to
Yeah.
do something about that. And my mom, being the good daughter herself, decided that going on a diet was important. So this happened at camp.
Oh my
And
goodness.
what my mom said to my counselor is that Robin can't have desserts. So every day at lunchtime, the kids would all be eating dessert and I couldn't have any, or I could have Jello. And every day I would run out of the dining room, slamming the screen door. I can still even hear it. So humiliated that I couldn't have dessert. So that's what I'm saying about humiliation. Someone might say, is that really humiliating? And I think if we all go back and look at our lives,
Mm-hmm.
there are moments of humiliation that we may not recognize them until we start looking at them,
Yeah. Yeah.
looking for them, right?
I agree 100%. That's why I go through and talk about all these things. And because formative years last forever, and
Yes.
humiliation or success, when you look back, I look back at all the goofing around that I did in high school and in college. Some of the biggest memories are when I was humiliated or embarrassed. or I recognize I did something stupid, and those stick
Yeah,
with you, and they
they
become
do.
pivot points. They really do. So
Yes. And if you don't, see them truly as learning experiences, but you hold on to the shame of them,
mhm.
or the woulda, coulda, shoulda. That's
Yep.
one of my most favorite expressions, right? I could have done it differently. I should have done it differently. All of that. If you don't heal that, and that can only be healed by reflection of it, right?
Mhm.
And honoring that part of yourself, because I truly believe, Rex, that everything that happened to me on that journey brought me to the place where I could write my book Feast and Famine about it,
Mhm.
where I by coming into recovery. The first time I wrote Feast and Famine, I was still in addiction, but I wrote it anyway. And then at the end, I didn't really have an ending. It was like, well, I hope this worked for you. It didn't work for me. Have a nice life. And then I put the book down. I came into recovery because I had a bulimic episode where I started bleeding from my face, and I could feel
Ah.
that my body was shutting down. Right. And I just said, okay, that's it. I've hit rock bottom. And so once I came into recovery, then I was able to rewrite the book, which then led to me becoming a recovery coach, which then led to me having my own podcast, Hungry for Answers, which is
Mhm.
perfect for someone with a eating disorder, right?
Right.
Which now led me right here to talking to you. So my feeling is that all of these experiences are part of our soul's journey and our soul's destiny. And
Mhm.
if we're blessed to recognize the patterns and follow them, we're able to come to a place of healing, and a place where we can serve others by by sharing our stories.
So I don't have any experience with bulimia, okay, or food
Mhm,
addiction. Well,
mhm.
maybe I have some food addiction. I mean, I used to play football, and I sort of still am a big guy and stuff. But yeah, um, did the bulimia rule all your mind all day? I mean,
All day.
all day. You know. So let me
And I
throw out.
don't know if it was the bulimia that did, but the obsessive compulsive food disorder, because I wouldn't have a desire to throw up a salad, right? So if I ate healthy, and it would just start at the very beginning of the day, depended upon what I ate for breakfast,
Mm,
whether I was good or bad, it would start the whole, it would set the day off. And so as if I had, and then I would say, well, then I'll have this, and well, then I'll have that. And then every day was a reset. Today's another day. Like I had to go through that in my mind. Today's another day. And I still do that, but what I do differently now is I use an app called My Fitness Pal,
yeah, that's a
and
great
I
app.
track what I'm eating. I track my macros, my combinations of carbs, fats, uh, and carbs, fats, and proteins. How much water am I drinking? Did I exercise? So that may sound obsessive in its own way, but I actually enjoy it, because then
Yeah,
I can see my progress, how healthy I'm being.
right.
And then I get to the end of the day and I'm like, yeah, this was a good day. And for
Well,
me, someone who struggled for 40 years, and if someone says to me, but that's obsessive too, and I'm like, so be it, right?
right.
It's a better obsession than the one that I was doing.
So, one of the things I don't think people understand, and it's often overlooked. Okay, you know, food is part of our lives. It's how keep us going.
Yes.
Okay, we have those hungers and those things, and in fact, over 40%, it's in the mid 40%. People debate it, of the world's population. The number one thought of that's in their mind that's dominating is to get enough to eat. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we don't think about that here in the United States in most cases. Of course, we do have poverty and people who that, but across the planet, to think of how big of a number that is. So,
Yeah.
here in Western cultures, whether it's Western Europe or uh, down under in the Pacific or here in the United States, um, we literally we don't think about it. It's just autopilot. So I'm
Right.
curious to think about how dominating that thought pattern is. That's why I asked. It's like, wow, I mean, every day you're thinking about that, because most people just don't, hey, we're fighting a little battle with some weight or something like that, a little spare tire or belly or whatever, but we don't, it's not a dominating thought.
Yeah, so for me, the dominating thought today is about how can I be the healthiest version of myself?
Right.
And with that, I choose better. My house is not filled with junk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when my house is filled with junk, I eat it.
Yeah.
So, I just spoke with my therapist about the fact that we were 2 weeks on vacation, and every day I was buying some other form of dessert. And I said to her, why do I think that just because I'm on vacation, it's an excuse to overeat?
Right.
So we're working on that, because it's not. I once did a program where the first thing they had you do was take out a 12-month calendar and cross off the days that you thought that it was okay to eat too much, right? So you had the weekends, you had your family's birthdays, you had all the holidays, right? You had different events, and by the time you were done, there was maybe like 10 days a month where you would think, I should eat healthy now. And so I'm trying to figure out how to eat healthy. And healthy to me is I can have a dessert, but I had to understand, why was I thinking that I had to buy something every day? Like why was I relaxing my standards?
Right.
And the only conclusion I could come to is that it rained for 14 days
So
on our beach vacation.
On a beach vacation.
So I think I was just disappointed.
So let me ask you this. If you could throw out, please, how do people get in touch with you? I meant to do this earlier, and we'll do this again.
Sure.
So how do people get in touch with their website, social media, etc.?
Yes. So my website is a play on my name, Robin Clare, and it's clarity.com, CLARE-ITY.com.
Oh, cool.
So Clarity. And then on Instagram, I'm Clarity by Robin.
Okay.
And on Facebook, I'm Clarity with Robin.
Fantastic. So question for you then.
Yeah.
What was the real pivot point where you finally said, okay, enough is enough? All right. I got to get out of this addiction. I mean, was it that vacation, or was there this aha moment? What was the thing that made you say, okay, enough?
It was when I really thought that one time, that last time that I had that bulimic episode, what, besides the blood, coming out of my nose,
Oof.
and I could feel for the first time what it was doing to my organs. My head was throbbing. I had a pain in my back. I could feel, it's almost like I was shown what this was doing to my physical body.
Okay.
And I knew at that moment that if I did not stop, I would not survive this.
So
it just was right there. It was in my face, my body. It was almost like my body took control and said, look what you're doing to me.
You're going to kill yourself. So did you have any relapses, when you were getting out of this addiction, or was it just stone cold?
No, that was so scary that no. What I do struggle with, as I said, with the vacation story, is looking when things come up that would have been triggers for me. I never believe that I'm going to throw up again, but I'm always struggling with the desire to overeat.
Yeah.
And so it's, for me, that's why it's a day-to-day thing, because I have to make the right choices every day. Listen, we have permission to eat 3 meals a day plus snacks.
Yeah.
Right. And there's food on every corner, so for me, I have to and I just said to my son the other day, I was going to pick up my dog from doggy daycare, and I was talking to him on the phone. I go, it's just crazy for me to drive by the farm, the ice cream farm. It's a farm that has ice cream. I'm like, it's really tough for me to drive by multiple times a week and not get ice cream.
Yeah.
And so at once a month, I now say I'm going to go there for ice cream before I pick the dog up. And I have a small ice cream. Like, so I'm not saying to everybody, I don't eat sweets, but
Right.
I can't have chocolate anymore. For some reason, my body became allergic to it. So, and that was one of my biggest triggers. So again, I think my body took control there and said, no, no more chocolate for you.
Yeah. So,
So
when you got through with this, you decided to take some action and help others. So,
yes.
tell us a little bit of what you've been up to help others get through these food addictions, bulimia.
Mhm.
What did you do? I know you've written a book.
Yeah, I have written a book. I've written actually 4 books,
Okay.
but the one book that I wrote here was, it's called Feast and Famine, Healing Addiction with Grace. And it's this whole idea that I talked about earlier about that we're truly perhaps addicted to our suffering. And that
Yeah.
once we surrender that suffering, we welcome in the grace of healing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what the book is about, and it's about my story. And then once I finished the book, that, launching the book and all that kind of good stuff, then I was guided, very spiritually guided. I was guided to become a recovery coach,
Right.
because I only knew how to recover through my spiritual path.
Mm-hmm.
And I really needed to understand the traditional path of recovery and
Right.
what's available to people out there. Didn't really know why I needed to know that. I just knew that I needed to do that. And then, I decided to combine my ability to write as an author and my understanding of writing and my understanding of how writing can be a tool for healing.
Right.
And I became a recovery writing coach. And so I help people to use writing as a tool for their own recovery.
Okay.
And then if they want to share that story, I help them to create a manuscript. And so I'm taking them from their story to a published book. And that's very exciting. I really believe that when you write down your story,
Mm-hmm.
you heal at a different level than just talking about it. And so in the first part, when people are using writing as a recovery tool, I just tell them go to town. Like, put it all out there. Even today, I would tell your audience, just write it all down. Write what you want to write about the people in your life. Don't hold back, right?
Yeah.
When you go to do a book, you might want to look at it and say, do I really want to tell this story? Are my parents still alive? Do I want to be that honest? And then you look at it again and you soften it up, because once you write it down and then you look at it again, you're even further in your recovery, and you may be able to see why you chose those people to be your parents, because
Right.
I truly believe we choose our parents on the soul level, and then we come in and they play their players in our play, and then we have to just realize that they were, no matter what, we don't have to condone anything that they've ever done, but we have to accept that they were doing the best that they can
Yeah.
with what they knew.
It's generational, some of the things that are passed down.
Mm-hmm.
I look back at my parents and I realize they learned what they learned on their own. Okay, there's no manual book.
Mm-hmm.
Traits were passed from my grandfather down to my father, and all those things. And it's easy when you get sort of midlife, you can look back and say, "Oh, I get this now." And especially when you have children, you understand, oh my goodness, I'm no different than my parents, and I've learned. Now, hopefully we can stop some types of behaviors, some of the generational things. It's different now there, but you're absolutely right. I mean, you have to let them be them and understand that they didn't know any
Yeah.
better.
And also, what I know for sure, Rex, if healing your relationship with your parents, whether they're on the earth plane or not anymore,
Yeah.
is the most important healing that you can do in your life.
Yeah.
Because that relationship that you had with your parents affects all the other relationships that you have.
Yeah.
And so taking the time in your life to review what happened, to accept what happened, to no longer blame them, and but don't condone their behavior. I always say that a lot because I don't want people to think that they have to accept what their parents did to them.
Yeah.
You don't.
You
You just
don't.
have to forgive them, because when you forgive your parents, you're really forgiving yourself. Like,
Yeah.
forgiving your parents is for you, not for them.
Yeah. You know,
And so,
I completely understand. I didn't get married till I was 28. Okay, but wham bam, we had 5 kids in 9 years.
mm,
Overwhelming environment, just overwhelming. But it made me come to clarity to understand as a parent what my parents were doing, and the nonsense I pulled, and then how they responded to that. And so I took my dad out for a beer, and I'm not really a drinker and wasn't at that point in time. And we just sat down, and I literally just told him, that my forgiveness and understanding that.
mhm,
And for the first time I've never revealed this, first time ever, I saw my dad cry. And so
mhm,
there. Now, fast forward to 7 years ago, he passed away at the age 82, and from Alzheimer's. Okay.
mhm,
And what we did when he was passing away, each of the kids, I'm one of four. My mom gave us the opportunity just to be alone with him, and there.
mm,
So each of us went in, and I don't know what my siblings did, but um, it was an opportunity to fully reconcile, and I did, and I went much deeper than what happened when I took him to lunch and stuff. And so I really applaud you, because I think it's so important to do that. And
yeah.
if not, we can hang on to those struggles and those feelings in lifetime. So
Right. And then when we hang on to those struggles and those feelings from our lifetime, that's when we look for addictive sources
hmm
to feel better.
yeah,
Right. And it's not just drugs and alcohol.
no,
It's watching too much Netflix.
yeah,
Right. It's staying in a job that you hate. It's staying in a relationship that doesn't serve you. It's all of these different things that we don't recognize as addiction,
yeah,
in our lives, but we do it to feel better, or to feel worthy
yeah.
in many instances.
No,
Or we don't, or because we don't feel worthy, we don't feel we're worthy of change.
yeah. Well, it's
Right.
interesting, like you said, most people think about addiction as far as drugs and alcohol, but there's so
Yeah.
many different behaviors that people
Mm,
turn to for those outlets. It can be, like you said, it can be food, it can be sex, it can be sports, it can be
yeah.
work, diving into a career so you are ignoring other parts of your life. It can be hobbies. Hey, I'm out fishing
Yes.
every day, or golfing my whole life is those things. And so we do look for those outlets now.
Yeah, and that I have found that more. I am also, as you mentioned, a podcaster myself, and my podcast is Hungry for Answers: From Recovery to Your Ultimate Life. And I'm finding I really maybe had a bias too, that maybe the people that I should have, the people in recovery, are people from traditional forms of recovery, traditional forms of addiction. And now I keep getting approached by people, and I'm like, what is your recovery story? And they're like, I'm in recovery from abusive parents,
hmm
and this is what I do. And I'm like, I have one, I'm in recovery from religion. Right? And I'm like, okay, let's talk. Let's see if we can create an episode. Because I always feel that this podcast, yours and mine, when we do this, it's such a gift for the people that get to listen. And so when people show up to be guests on my podcast, I know that I'm supposed to pay attention
Right.
and say, what is the gift that they're supposed to bring to my audience?
Okay, so I understand, as we talked off air before we got started today, that you're coming out with some courses to help people in this space. So
I am.
let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so the first course that's coming out in the fall is called The Right Recovery, WRITE.
Okay.
And it'll be as a self-guided, it's a self-guided, but it'll also, I think I'm going to be teaching it
Hmm.
online as well, looking at what does it take to write your recovery story. So it's not as simple as it seems.
Hmm.
Takes a commitment. It takes an environment that you can write in. It takes a willingness to look at your story. And it's not for anybody else's reading,
Hmm.
it's for you. So I'll be announcing that in the fall. And then I'm also doing a anthology. And an anthology is when a bunch of authors write a book, and the book is called The Reluctant Mystic. And
Hmm.
the idea of the book is that spiritual people are often given really, really good assignments from the spiritual realm that require a courageous attitude. And some people never do them. And
Hmm.
some people just do them anyway, right? They'll just take it on. My uh, my spiritual mantra is bring it on. And so I've had a lot of opportunities to do some very interesting things. So this book is going to be about how to have the courage to follow your spiritual destiny. And then there'll be a course that follows that. So that
Fantastic.
may not be till the beginning of the next year, because we have to first put the book together.
Sure.
But it's called The Reluctant Mystic, and I'm just really excited about it.
That's fantastic. So, it's a great guest. It's good to have people on. Thank you for being so transparent, because sometimes these things are tough to talk about, or
Yes.
yeah, we feel a little vulnerable exposing that. So we've learned a lot today. So, and one last question that I ask all my guests, okay?
Mhm.
And this question is a little bit out of left field here, and so we all sort of are familiar with this a concept of a bucket list. Things we want to do before our time is finished here in this dispensation. But there's always an opposite to everything in the universe. And in fact, I've interviewed the bucket list guy, and
Oh, wow.
he's from Melbourne, Australia. He talks, and his whole thing isn't so much about, goofy things, just living a purposeful life. Well, anyway, episode 60, people check it out. It's a great conversation. Anyway, so there's always the opposite. Now that opposite list rhymes with bucket and starts with an F, but I'm kind of have a family show here, so we don't, throw those kinds of words out. So that F it list is something that we don't want to do. I have no interest in it, or I don't want to repeat it. So I'll let you think for a second about what might be on your F it list. I'll give you a couple of samples from me. Number one, I'm not eating any more monkey brains, sardines, or caviar. There's just some interesting stories around that. I'm never going to have a collection of pet snakes. That just isn't going to happen. And
Mhm.
then one that I share a lot, and it was a very impactful. It was supposed to be spiritual, and I did an episode on this. I will never, ever again do a Lakota Sioux sweat lodge. Now, that
Yeah.
was excessive drumming, excessive chanting, excessive heat and humidity. And then there was a slice of nudity in the whole thing. And gosh, it was just really, really difficult. And I went there hoping to get something out of it, and it wasn't what I got out of it. So, what might be an item or two that's on Robin's effort list?
Yeah, so the two things I'm thinking of is that I will never go back to corporate America.
Okay, I'm with you on that one.
I I just I put my dues in. I'm retired from there now, and I just, unless I can go back there and just change the entire way they handle their people, um, then if I could make a change, I might go back, but I don't think so.
Hmm.
The other is I went to the Oneness University in India, and going to India is such a life-altering,
Oh, yeah.
difficult process that I don't think I'm going back to India again. But I do love the teachings, and I have found a way to work with the teachers from India online, and so I'm still practicing from the Oneness University. But I got so sick going back and forth, adjusting to the, I don't know, maybe the height of the air pressure and everything. I'm like, I'm not going there. And yeah, that's really all I can think of. Um, on my actual bucket list, my desire is to live at the beach and be able to walk on the beach every day at sunrise.
Fantastic. Well, thank you
Yeah,
for coming on. It's been
you're
awesome. It's
welcome.
So interesting to talk to somebody who's been on this type of a journey, who's changed and is now contributing to the world on that. So it's a great story, and I'm thankful you took the time to come on and tell that. When your new courses are out, we'll have to have you back on the show, talk about those further,
Great.
talk about a few other things, but it's been fantastic. So we'll call this an episode, folks. Glad to have Robin on with us today. Don't forget to stop by her website. Okay, so one last time, Robin, if you toss out your
Sure.
website.
Yep, it's clarity.com. That's CLARE-ITY.com.
Fantastic. All right, folks. Thank you for tuning in with us today. Glad to have you. Don't forget to stop by my website because we have Robin's profile out there and lots of other interesting folks. And it's always fun to stop by. If you've missed an episode, we have a whole list of those things. So I will say what I say at the end of every single episode. Uh, be brave, be bold, be safe, and make it a great day.